Yeah, that's it right there. So yeah, they've got some solar, although those don't really create enough to do anything.
Just for show.
Yeah, I think it's like 10% of their needs, but it's still better to have that than nothing. So they do some things right. It's like a really strong mix of like good intentions and doing some things right with like just like really messing up. Like the power structure especially is probably the most toxic thing.
Especially it's mostly men at the helm.
Yeah,
right?
so what they did is Maharishi was like, all right, you give me $1 million, I'll make you a king of a section of the world.
I'm on my way to Fairfield, Iowa, a small, quaint community in a very rural community. But for this area of the United States, it's a very diverse and youthful community. The people here care about sustainability, recycling, art. You will see a young progressive influence all over this small town. And it's like many others. People connect at the local coffee shop. Students live in small apartments just above the shop. And surprisingly, there's performance art on nearly every corner. But behind these colorful buildings lies a somewhat sinister and dark history. To get a sense of just how much this cult has infiltrated the town, I speak to one person who grew up within the cult. This is our conversation.
You can get a pan of this if you zoom in. This is like a astrological thing.
Astrological thing?
It's like a, it's weird, like astrological structures.
Do they hold any, like, significance?
Yeah, they're supposed to, like, correspond to stars or whatever, and I don't know, a lot of there's the huge astrology. They have their own Eastern version of Eastern astrology. So this is, like, connected. Each one of those has a special meaning, and a lot of them are just different, sort of like observatory. It's technically considered an observatory, so things have, like, different shadows at different times, and it's supposed to help you with, like, spiritual development.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And then this is the main student center. You can't see it that well from here, but
I've been in there.
You've been in there, yeah. And you can see there's like the stained glass thing is like a sun. There's definitely, like, if you look deeper in a lot of it, it really is like a sun worshipping. A lot of it is about like sun worship, which is, I mean, pretty common for.
Is that it? Like,
that's just a normal observant. They'll just have
normal
little amphitheater. Like they'll just have little concerts and stuff there.
So how often are students like over here?
Well, this is where they come to eat. This is like the main place to eat.
The main. Oh.
Yeah, they have a cafeteria. They have a lecture hall.
Does the gyro mean anything?
Our gyro is the donor, the name of the people who donated.
Oh, okay.
You can get some of these too if you want.
Okay. Yeah, let's go for it.
Golden Jubilee, I think, is just like a festival that they have. It's I think they just have it every year, I think.
The Golden Jubilee.
Yeah. And this is a typical example of like a Ayurvedic building. They tore down almost every building on the initial Parsons College campus. This is one of the original ones and just happened to be laying. So they have like their own sort of feng shui. And they want everything to face east, and if something isn't facing east and they can't put an entrance in that way, they'll just like tear it down, or if it isn't meeting their kind of Vedic architecture, just like Ayurveda.
Why is it important for it to have an
I mean, they think it's like spiritual development. Like if things face east, it'll like help them get enlightened, basically. And so if it's not facing east and they can't have an east entrance, or if there are other issues with the layout, they'll just like tear it down. So they tore down like a ton of buildings, including like a historic church that used to be over there.
Oh wow.
Which also did just have like mold issues too. But so this is like their K through 12, which at least they have like an international It's got like a major international vibe here, where like they have a lot of students from all over. So that's why they have all these flags. Because their whole goal is like, we want to create world peace. And we think we can do it through meditation.
Sounds pretty classic. So does anyone ever ask like, oh, well, why does the energy flow into a home through the east?
Well, they have, I mean, it comes down, I think that comes back to like the astrology stuff as well. There's reasons for everything. They have like science, quote unquote science responses for everything. But yeah, it's fundamentally about like energy flow. Like they have to have windows, so there's a like line of light sight through the whole building.
So they really, is it because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and it's kind of
it's kind of like a sunrise thing. Yeah, and that's where it comes down to like the sun, again, like the sun worshiping. There's like a lot of signs of sun worship, which is interesting.
Interesting. Is there like a version of God in...
They do, well, they claim to be like, oh, whatever religion you want, you can still do, or whatever. And so like you can still worship your own God or whatever. But here's like the recreation center, which actually was initially constructed in like 2 weeks for a massive meditation conference. So that had like...
Really?
I think 10,000 people. They call it the 10,000 course in like the winter. And there's, an athlete is an artist who brings the joy of his feelings into the activity of his body. There's just so many random like quotes like that. Yeah. But yeah, this is also another area where they like just tore down a ton of buildings. And they like had a really nice lake, and they drained the lake because the water wasn't on like the right side, which is funny because later it turns out that it was actually okay, even by their own like theories, that they just wanted to like...
I see the dome, I see the nipple.
Yeah, so this is the dome, so this is the meditate. This is where they meditate. There's one for men and one for women, and that's supposed to be sort of like and I don't want to call it like an energy collector on top. At the top, it's called a collage, but that's part of the architecture as well. Then we have the men's dome on the left.
The Tower of, what is it? Invincibility?
Yeah, there's a Tower of Invincibility, which is supposed to like radiate. I don't like how this card is doing behind me. So we've got the men and women's dome. The idea was like you weren't supposed to meditate together because people might like bang each other.
While they're meditating, they might just, oh, oops, they gotta have sex really fast.
Yeah, which guarantee they would. And yeah, they're called ruse because of guru.
No way.
Yeah.
Ruse as in they follow the guru, Maharishi?
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's funny because there was a misnomer because in the meditation domes, they actually practice yogic flying, which is they're trying to fly. And so some people thought it was for kangaroo because they were hopping like roos. Yeah.
That's actually...
But it's also just it's just a nickname anyway. It can mean whatever you want. These are the old frats from the original Parsons College.
These are frats?
Yeah, which got converted into like meditation housing or like university housing as well. So
which is also segregated male and...
These are segregated male and female, yes.
So is there like an inherent concern, like is sex considered like distracting from getting enlightened?
It's funny, generally they're not super anti-sex, but some people do get really into the idea of ojas, which is supposed to be like your life force, which of course, you want to have enough as possible to get enlightened and all that stuff. And so literally they think of like ejaculating as losing life force or ojas.
Really?
Yeah.
This is all like university property, right?
Yeah, some people own houses on it. It's kind of a mix, but yeah. So we've got private homes over here, and these are all the like Vastu architecture is what it's called. It's like the Eastern feng shui, and they have their own brand of it. So like that's the interesting thing is Maharishi is like a lot of it is just Hinduism related things, but he'll kind of have his own brand. So like there's Maharishi yoga stuff you do like the yogas, asanas, and then there's the Maharishi Ayurveda is different than the other Ayurveda, and then the Maharishi, just anything is different. So it's kind of like if you don't do that one, you're doing the wrong one. Like
are the people who live in these trailers likely followers? Or...
So yeah, 100%, or they're like computer science students that are in the cheapest housing, which is interesting. So this is, yeah, the trailer park that they put up for, I think, for the course and for meditation, just cheap housing in, was it the 70s? And then now, I mean, it's sort of like a cash cow.
So when we see another one of the like spiral things on the top of the house.
Yeah, collage.
Collage?
Yeah.
So.
Call it Hershey's Kiss.
The Hershey's Kiss.
Yeah, but these trailers, I mean, it's interesting because some of them are still fine, but a lot of them are like mold ridden and stuff. And like it's a trailer park.
Yeah.
With old trailers. They have a stop sign. But you have people who are, you know, have been living in them for 30 years who definitely weren't planning on it.
Wow.
But they just kind of meditate and they stay here. But I mean,
because there are full-time meditators, right? Where
yeah, there's people that, depending on how much money there is in the community or what the donors are doing, you can get paid to just meditate in the dome.
How much is it, like a minimum wage thing, or is it like?
Oh, it's definitely below minimum wage. I mean, it's basically just like a housing subsidy for people that want to do it. I mean, it's
because the theory is the more people meditating, the more
peace you'll have. Peace. Yeah, you'll radiate. Yeah.
Because you're radiating peace throughout the community and the world.
And the theory is that if it's like the domains of a magnet, so if you have 1% of the domains in a magnet aligned, all of them align. So they think that if they get even a square root of 1% of people meditating, that they'll create world peace, which I mean, is not that many people. I think that was just a way of having like a more achievable number. And they do claim to have some studies where they'll go into like war-torn areas and go on the border and meditate and look at crime or violence, death data and stuff, and that it goes down. So that's something that, you know, could be looked into.
Interesting.
And then we have, this is a good example of like the inequality too. So we have like your trailer park right over there, and then literally a quarter mile away, you have like the biggest house in town, which is this massive, typical like example of Sedentary, where you've got a lot of those cloches, and I don't know how much this is, like 5,000 square feet or something. They've got a little pool over there with a cliff.
So the dome, like that guy had like, but like that house had like several tiers of it, of the like thing on top of the house.
Yeah.
Like some people have like a little statue, and then some people have what looks like a skylight kind of situation. Is that, does that
the skylight
let more light in?
The skylight is, yeah, so a lot of it is about light. They do want to have more light, so the skylights make sense. But yeah, so this is a sort of a newer place. This is where the people who could afford better places than the trailers end up.
So how many people here do you feel like are probably a part of the movement versus...
Well, there's a lot of people. What happened is a lot of people were excited in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever. Some various boomers were really excited about the movement and into it, and then they sort of moved here and got sort of stuck in the community where they like all of their friends and family are somewhat connected to it, but they're kind of like half believers, you know. Like a lot of people I know like they'll meditate to just feel a little more relaxed sometimes, but they don't prescribe to the subscribe to the like super deep stuff of like you know, like there's people who, when they sit down to eat, they have to face east. It's like a spiritual obsessive compulsive disorder. It's really interesting.
Oh, that's
and so like you'll see two couples sitting on the same side, and then people have like a power dynamic of like who gets the east seat and stuff. But in general, most people are here for the community, and they like to some degree. Like if you were to ask them, do you believe everything that Maharishi ever said? I'd say probably 40 or 50% of them would say yes, and then another half of them would be like, no, some of it's not literal, and all that stuff.
Yeah, it definitely seems generational from just my outsider's observation. Like, even having come here several years ago and meeting some of your friends, like, it feels like in most cults or cultic groups, they won't let people leave, and if you leave, you're kind of ostracized. You never get to come back. Like, you lose your family. But here, it feels like your generation, like our generation, people have come and gone.
Yeah, there's probably like a 1% retention rate. A lot of people want to move back just for the community and like the safety and how tight knit everything is, and like the sort of like movement fall off people, but and their community. You know, people who are just like like-minded and into like, you know, just healthy and nice and peace and stuff.
Is there a color? Like, I'm noticing a lot of the houses are like pastels.
So yeah, so black is actually considered bad. So like the same way that in terms of the architecture, a south entrance is considered bad. Black is the joke is black is the south entrance. So like I'm driving a black car around. Some people care less. So like this person has a black car and
lives in. So what is that dome thing on top of the house?
So it's called a Colossian. It's kind of, you can kind of think of it as like an energy beam.
An energy?
They like beam and energy up and down.
Sending, so it sends and receives.
I mean, they don't really, it's just, no one's really thinking about it. They're just like, okay, I'm supposed to have this on here and it's supposed to help with like the good feeling. And the whole idea with them, and I understand it's like feng shui, the idea is they want to have a good feeling in the house. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about light, it's all about energy flow, space, and healthy materials. Like a lot of these are built with the green materials.
And was that a Maharishi thing, like the sustainability?
Yeah, Maharishi was definitely into sustainability. There's a sustainability program at the university. In Ayurveda, it's about the health. And so there's some things that are like, you understand they're positive, but then it's like, oh well, we want to be so positive that we'll like ignore mental health. And
they do ignore mental health.
They did they're a lot better about it now after they had like some suicides and like mental health crises at the university, like where somebody went off their medication due to meditation, thinking they could do it, and then murdered somebody, actually stabbed somebody. Yeah. And that was like a major wake-up call. Yeah, that was in the dining hall.
It was on university campus?
Yeah, a couple decades ago, and they tore down that whole building because it wasn't to the like proper layout and stuff, and they were like, everything is bad, and then they
so it was because of the energy.
They thought part of that, but then there was also a recognition of like, okay, this was a mental health crisis too, and we need to have more awareness about that and like less denial. Do you want to go to the eco village, or do you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
So your parents were followers before he moved here.
Yeah, so my parents, a lot of people came from the East Coast. So they had, they had connections to it, or they saw a lecture or something and got into it, learned meditation, learned how to teach meditation. There were schools in different states, and then they bought, for $1 million, they bought Parsons as it was failing. So it was like kind of like a rich kid, lazy rich kid school. And I don't know what went wrong, mismanagement or whatever, but they sold that for $1 million, pretty massive campus. And then everybody moved here and put their kids through like the little school that they had there, as well as the university.
What was it like going to school here? Because it was a really tiny class, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we had like 30 kids in our class, and there was...
I had 650 in my graduating class.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's insane.
It's also weird. So like a lot of the people here come from like Ivy League backgrounds, so it was very academic. There were a lot of national merit scholars in the heyday, and they had a lot of focus on academics as well. So, oh, my mom's calling me.
That's so crazy.
No, so there's still Stapacevate influence, but these are all off grid. So that's got like solar water, yeah. And so this is probably the best part of what happened. That's like local timber frame. They've got greenhouses to grow stuff. And, they've got eco materials. There's a wind turbine. Everything's a solar, off-grid water.
It is cool that there's a full-on like neighborhood of a completely off-grid neighborhood, whereas people I think believe, if you're off-grid you have to be like a van lifer or.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, that's what they do right, but I mean, yeah, it's. I think probably the biggest issue with the movement and what it is that they've kind of sold people on this idea that if they just meditate enough, they will reach enlightenment, everything will be good, they'll be happy, they'll get rich if that's what they want, they won't get sick, blah, 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 they'll get superpowers even, but that just results in, a lot of people who have been sedentary now in there for 4 hours a day, plus their probably sedentary job for the last 30 plus 40 whatever years.
So you would kind of surmise that means they're probably not the healthiest people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think that the lifespan is particularly better considering like the economic you know, considering that these people, a lot of them came from like pretty good economic means, came here, didn't have economic opportunity, but stayed for spiritual reasons, and are like destitute and sedentary when they could be, you know, more active, more community. There's also this belief that like if you just meditate, you're contributing. So like a lot of people use that as an excuse not to fully do, you know, community volunteering and stuff. And like, yeah, that's pretty, I know I'm putting people at a higher standard than your average person, but that's one problem that I have.
It feels like it can be extremely isolating and individualistic while promoting community and unity in a funny way, because it's like, well, yeah, you should be spending your whole day meditating because it'll make you enlightened. Oh, but by the way, it's also going to make everyone else enlightened. So like, that's what you should be doing with your time.
Yeah.
Which is interesting from like a cult studies perspective, is they want to control your time, but how many people are doing like labor for free around the campus?
Well, there's another economically, so what happens is people become economically destitute because they move to a small town, and they end up working with or for the movement and the university for like food and housing, and they end up, you know, all these boomers don't have retirement money.
So it's mostly like the older generation?
Well, yeah. So we have this big boomer, you know, Maharishi would go and speak to like tens of thousands of people just as he toured the U.S. in the 60s and 70s, and as the Beatles guru, you know, he was a big deal. And so that's the generation that really latched onto this. And so they're holding on to just be like, oh, I just really want to become enlightened. And then the result is, they end up becoming, you know, living in a trailer for 40 years.
Wow.
But, or they're better off, they're able to keep their economic opportunities and they get a place, you know, like this. But it's hard because there's pros of the community, but then there's also the negatives of being like that sedentary and individualistic and stuff like that. But it's hard because it's like, you know, you want to create world peace, yeah, do this, and we've got science behind it, and they do have a lot of science on the meditation, but a lot of it is, you know, some of the same stuff that you'll see with other forms of relaxation. But, you know, there's studies with like diabetes in native populations, PTSD, and people who were veterans and stuff that have turned out to be really good. So there's definitely positives to that, but then you go deeper. I think where you get diminishing returns as you go deeper into the other techniques, and then you end up putting more and more time in it, and it doesn't necessarily yield its stuff, and you end up, a lot of people study into deep detail.
What are some of like these
philosophies which
they get obsessed with it, you were saying?
Yeah, so they have Vedic science, which is, you know, like Ayurveda is a type of Vedic stuff, and they have people that get PhDs in it, and
but they can't really use that PhD in like
they can't really use it outside of this community. I mean, unless someone's just looking for like a minimum of having a PhD.
Just to say they. Well, I remember when Jim Carrey came here, he got like an honorary doctor, which isn't necessarily rare for colleges to do that, but it is interesting from a college that it's almost like they're making up degrees.
Yeah, they do have, and you can even do your individual study and like make up your degree. You can do like
you can
Vedic sustainability. If you want, which is
just
wild.
Create your degree.
Yeah, here's another one.
So when it comes to like the community of people who are not a part of the movement, I feel like the economic differences are pretty stark as well. Like these houses I'm not seeing around other areas of Fairfield, like this size, they're pretty small, more run down, they're not as new. Like, is there any public local concern, or has there been, about this group?
There's been a really bittersweet relationship in the sense that,
because this is a red state, very Christian state.
So in the beginning it was a really big issue, and then they started to realize, the local population realized that all these business owners, a lot of the business owners who were employing people and stuff were part of the movement. So if they were like too negative about it, you know, that wouldn't add up. If they're helping support the community, and they have, you know, essentially kept a small town more economically viable. You know, it's one of the top small towns in that sense. A lot of businesses, a lot of like tech related businesses, because the high education level. So you've got that interesting aspect. Like, I would play sports as a kid with the town folk, and to kind of hear them joke about stuff like, oh, you do meditation? Is that anything like masturbation? If so, I'd love to learn. Like, they're just kind of, you know, that's kind of their attitude about it. It's kind of whatever. They're kind of crazy doing their own thing, but Yeah, a lot of people are Christian too, so they were scared of like, what is this that's happening? And then there was other interesting times. So they were so desperate to get, oh my God, you gotta get this guy on the right. They were so desperate to get, they were so desperate to get numbers of people meditating for peace that they actually shipped in thousands of Indian pundits who are apparently not real spiritual people, but they kind of just wanted to get the numbers, and they cordoned off this whole section on the right here. They fenced in about 1,000 Indian men who claimed to basically be Indian priests who were going to meditate for peace. And there were all sorts of scandals with local, middle-aged women hooking up with them because they were just young Indian guys who just wanted to come to the U.S. and see the beautiful U.S. women and the culture and whatever, just have some experience. And wow, they ended up getting literally fenced in over here, which is wild. So I think that's probably one of the bigger ethical scandals that they've had.
Wait, who got fenced in? The Indians?
The Indian men, yeah, thousands of Indian men, and then they moved them out to a compound in the country.
What?
Fenced in, yeah. So that was wild, and that was like a perfect example of like good intentions gone awry, and people would have to like smuggle them cigarettes and stuff. Like,
oh my gosh, when was this?
This was probably a decade ago, 15 years ago.
That's honestly not like that long ago.
Yeah, it's not that long ago.
I was expecting that to be like the 70s.
Yeah, that's where we just come do donuts when it was icy.
So do you have to sit in facing a certain direction?
Everybody in there is facing east when they meditate. So.
Wow.
Yeah, and part of the fences, they build the fence as part of the like Vedic architecture. They need the fences. The idea is like to have everything squared off, and
it's just so nipply. I can't. It literally looks like a breast.
The nipple of meditation.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit about like Transcendental Meditation, because you're given like a secret mantra when you're 13 or something?
Yeah, so you're given a secret mantra you can learn at the age of 10, and you just repeat the mantra on the ideas that it like calms your mind down and lowers your level of stress. And so the whole meditation idea is like, if you get rid of enough stress, you become enlightened, which is interesting. If you purify your nervous system enough, you reach enlightenment, in which case everything is just constant flow state. You get everything you want, and you help like create peace or whatever. So it's interesting in that sense. And then of course the advanced meditation, which is, it's part of, I believe it's just part of Hindu scripture, which is the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which are basically superpowers. It's flying, and I think there's one that's even like invisibility. And
invisibility.
I think that's one, yeah, and just different superpowers, which is funny. So it's like, who doesn't want superpowers, who doesn't want to get rich, and who doesn't want to become enlightened, So if you believe what they're saying, then...
So did Maharishi possess these superpowers?
No, I mean, people claim they've seen people fly over the years, but yeah, there's been no proof. And Maharishi, like, especially toward the end, he would say a lot of crazy shit, when he became, like, gone to his 80s and stuff, and he, has a lot of scandals with people, like celebrity people back in the Beatles days, and goes like Mia Farrow, and a lot of claims of him being a womanizer too. They haven't been disproven or fully proven, I guess. How could you? But there's enough of them to be like, okay, yeah, there's something there. Like, that's not cool. This is a good view coming in here too.
Yeah, it's very phallic.
Oh yeah. The Tower of Invincibility. I don't know. I guess the theory is that would help like radiate the peace.
Well, does it pull the energy from the other dome, from like the domes during the meditation?
I think that's the idea. Is like an antenna. Like they're hoping that it's gonna like amplify the meditation peace waves. Which is, yeah, I mean, the idea is they believe, and they do tie into physics, which is interesting. Say like a Harvard physicist who's like, the unified field under everything is actually where you go when you meditate. And I'm like, if that actually happened, you would just dissolve. And they're like, no, it's where your consciousness goes when you're meditating, and then that's how the peace radiates. So they have a theory behind everything.
Yeah, but is it more like quantum physics?
Yeah, he's into quantum physics. Yeah. No, a lot of, you can use quantum physics to justify any spiritual practice. So they were one of the first to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it right there. So yeah, they've got some solar, although those don't really create enough to do anything. For show. Yeah, I think it's like 10% of their needs. But it's still better to have that than nothing. So they do some things right. It's like a really strong mix of like good intentions and doing some things right with like just like really messing up like the power structure, especially, is probably the most toxic thing.
Especially it's mostly men at the helm.
Yeah,
right?
so what they did is Maharishi was like, all right, you give me $1 million, I'll make you a king of a section of the world. They call them Rajas, which is just like Hindu for king, I believe. And so you pay him money, you pay the organization money. And he's like, all right, you can have Brazil. Like, you can have this. How about you'll be the Raja of Australia, and you're responsible for getting people to meditate and create world peace in Australia.
Oh, so that's
And
how he
you're
would
powerful.
give them, like, so they would go and open up, like, a Transcendental Meditation Center there or something.
Yeah. So I remember in high school visiting, like, the headquarters in Europe, and, like, there's just a bunch of white guys in crowns sitting around a table with gold coins. And I was like, this is fucking wild. And so,
even when you were young, like,
we knew, we would always kind of joke about it. I mean, we wanted to do all the meditation stuff, and we're like, maybe I'll get enlightened, but we were always just cracking dry jokes about it.
But your parents are still so, like, devoted and into it.
Yeah, I mean, they'll still meditate. I mean, like, my dad doesn't believe a lot of the, like, deeper stuff about it, but he's like, meditation makes me feel good, I'm gonna keep doing it. It's part of his relaxation schedule, and he does the yoga before it, which is good for him. A lot of people, like, they're supposed to do yoga stretches before they meditate, but they just don't do it. So, like, the sedentary issue is, it's more of, part of it is just how people are executing things, and part of it is just how the community's been set up, unfortunately, too.
Well, what's different about this group is there wasn't, like, a leader that replaced Maharishi, right?
Well, that was the idea. There technically is one of the Rajas, like the head Raja, I think he's also a scientist because he's from Lebanon, or is he from Iraq? Anyway, he's like half Middle Eastern, I think half European. Raja Ram technically is the
Raja
one.
Ram?
Yeah,
That's really ironic.
which is funny because Maharishi has a family who also has their own kind of sketchy stuff going on too, who wanted to take control. But then this random dude was very, I guess, enough, like, sycophantic enough to be given the helm to some extent. Is the one who's technically, like, the next in line, who was sort of in charge of everything, but I don't know. I haven't been keeping up with those politics lately, but I will say, going to the school as a young person having gender segregation was also really interesting. And
yeah, was there an idea of, like, superiority? Like, were men considered superior, or was it just like men and women are different? Like, what was?
Yeah, they were different in their own way, and a lot of it was heteronormative, right? So, like, men were not allowed to grow their hair out; you had to cut it. Women had to wear dresses. They fixed that since then, which is great. But when I was young, like, if my hair touched my ears, I got, like, a note to get a haircut, right?
From your teacher?
Yeah. And
did you meditate at school?
Yes, we meditated in school. We did yoga. You go there, you do, like, the little asana stretching. They do sun salutations.
That's what's, like, interesting about cult, and I'm reminded of when I came here and I was, like, enamored with this place. And there's, like, sustainability initiatives, there's a lot of health initiatives, there's a lot of, like, veganism and vegetarianism. It feels very, very progressive. Mm-hmm. Like, I feel like if you told, like, an LA mom, like, oh my god, I want to bring my kid to a school where they do yoga and meditate every day, it would be like
it'd be cool and a new thing. Yeah.
So it's like there's always
they're failing
positive
to market, actually. They could be marketing way better and tapping into that more, and they've got a few celebrities on board. I mean, they had Russell Brand, I think Katy Perry,
Jim Carrey. But at the same time, it's like you said, and it just sounds, I'm more curious about those, like, more dangerous, because on the surface, you do think, it's just people that like to connect with nature and meditate, and some of the stuff is weird about with the titty domes and the dick of invincibility, but, like, it's pretty, it sounds great, like, let's just meditate. And then you get to more of the insidious stuff where people are like, well, I'm so enlightened I can fly and I'll prove it, and they jump off a building.
Thankfully that in particular hasn't happened, but we've functionally had that where, like, people were so disappointed or just unstable from not getting mental health care that they ended up taking their own life. That's roughly the same.
Do you know of Maharishi ever saying, like, you won't need your mental health? Because that's such a common.
Well, there's this culture of, I mean, he might have said, you could get off medication, but I can't speak to that. But there's the idea of oh, well, we're all going to be enlightened, we're all going to be perfect. So the more perfect that you act, the more enlightened you are.
Oh, so that
And
law of
created
attraction
this concept
thing of, like,
yes.
pretend you're fine and you'll be fine.
Exactly. So somebody can just be like closet gay or something and feel like the pressure not to come out and not seek any help, and then have other mental health issues surrounded by that, and then just never.
Are they pretty homophobic?
They're really open with that lately. You know, like trans kids are, from what I hear, quite well accepted at the local school, and things like that. But there's still like just the idea of like, you're not gonna get, if you're different in some way, or if you have some mental health issue, or you're on medication for being bipolar, schizophrenic, like you might be softly encouraged, especially in the past, to work to go off your medication, which who doesn't want to go off medication? You know, that's a promise that people, of course, are going to want to, they're going to find enticing. So,
wow, purpose of creation
is the expansion of happiness.
Wow.
That's the
quotes.
dorms.
Oh, that's the women's dorm. They don't even get to be on campus?
I mean, it's across the street. It's technically part of campus, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a lot more picturesque over there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And
they're like, let's throw the girls across the street.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. But the good thing is that they fixed a reasonable amount of their problems. The problem is their fundamental, they just have too many conflicts, like many religions, really. Mm-hmm. They have too many just logical conflicts. Like if you look too deeply, things just don't make sense. Okay, you meditate and you'll get rich. Okay, what about these people who've been meditating for 50 years? They're not rich. They're living in a trailer. And just the ideas that they have through the whole like science that they teach as well has a lot of contradictions in it. A lot of things that Maharishi says have outright conflicted with other things that he said.
Yeah,
and he'll just kind of say what he wants in some situations in the past, and everything's on video. So you go, oh, well, he said that, and then he said this other thing. Like, what's up with that? It's just like the maintenance place. And we can go by the sustainability part.
Do you know if he ever like encouraged isolating family that didn't agree with?
And that's funny because I don't think he did, and I feel like ironically, that is what has not allowed the movement to continue to the same degree that other, like, let's say Mormonism or Amish stuff has, where it's like you have such a pressure to stay in it. No, 99 out of 100 of the kids born to it just go and study somewhere else, and then they live in a city somewhere, and they're just like well-educated, slightly alternative people or whatever. And so here's electric car charging.
Yeah, I think it is really interesting in that aspect. It feels like that full spectrum of type of follower, where you have like the fringe members, but then who would you consider, because like usually cults and cult leaders have like inner circle dynamics where you might follow someone online and like appreciate what they have to say, but you don't go see them speak, and you don't spend all of your time obsessively meditating. But then there are the people that are like, I need to get as close to the leader as possible.
Yeah, so that, when he was around, so he died, and that's part of the reason this thing is collapsing to an extent right now, is that like, he died over a decade ago, and you had people who they just wanted to be around him, they just wanted to like soak in that gravitas or whatever.
Oh, hold on. Prosperity is the enrichment of... That's interesting.
Yeah, so now that he's gone, you then have people just kind of trying to suck up to the next highest person, but it's still just, it's not as magical. It's not this giggly Indian guy with a beard anymore. It's just like some just random rich white guy. So they're not as charismatic as he was, so they're unable to keep that going.
That is such a word salady quote to put on a building for everyone to see forever.
Yeah.
I'm like, what is that? What do you really mean, dude?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's interesting. I do think, though, that it's like the worst off are those people, they just got really into it and they gave up everything. They gave up their jobs and moved away from their families. and just are now living in a trailer, like,
Yeah.
and they're, intelligent, capable people in many cases who could have contributed more.
Well, because this is a very rural community. It's in rural Iowa. It's far away from anything. The closest city is, what, an hour or two away?
Yeah.
Like big-ish city. Like, when you're driving here, it's fields for days. So I can't even imagine, like, if you lived in a big city or had more of a hustle and bustle. But then I can also see, like, well, our nervous system needs to calm down. So.
Yeah, so it's hard, because then it's like, okay, who am I to say their life is actually better? Maybe they would have lived in a city and got on the grind and got high blood pressure and died earlier. Like, it's impossible to really know. I just know that there's enough sort of like money grubbing and conflicting ideas that have sucked people in who are well-meaning that, it's very debatable whether it improved their life, and which you could probably say about any lifestyle.
Any group. Well, do your parents, do you ever feel contentious with you and your parents? Like,
I definitely have felt like there's pressure to meditate, or like they're disappointed that I haven't been like meditating as much, or that I don't meditate, or that I'm not like involved in the Transcendental Meditation movement. Like, I didn't become a teacher, which is sort of saying like, oh, you don't believe what we believe, kind of, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you really believe what we believe, you would be teaching people meditation to like help them out and help create world peace.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely the pressure I get. And so there was, as a kid, that was the main thing. It was like, you are the children who are supposed to usher in the next age of world peace and enlightenment. Like, that was the pressure that we had as a kid.
All 13 of you.
Yeah, all 13 of you little fucking kids. And meanwhile, you're just like trying to jerk off and feeling guilty about losing your ojas, and like wanting to talk to the girls, but like they're separated from you, although we did have a good social life. Like, we would hang out with the girls all the time outside.
So, but even if your life force was basically your semen, so kind of like in Christianity where they have this like purity culture, is it like, don't touch yourself or you'll not be enlightened? Or,
I mean, there's a little bit of that, and in fact, there's gender segregated, like, advanced sort of channels you can go down. So there's a women's and a men's, and that's highly encouraged to be celibate, separated into adulthood, kind of like a monk. There's the women's version of this, like, there was actually like it was like a ideal girls' school that occurred, and they were just taught all of these weird puritanical values. And then you have this thing called Purusha, where the men go and basically become monks and like I guess they can kind of get supported to just, not get married and just meditate and like study ancient Sanskrit stuff and the teachings of Maharishi.
Wow.
So we have to fucking go to Bic City.
Well, I mean, it does seem like the university is the main means of recruitment now.
Yeah.
Like, getting big names like David Lynch behind the program at the university to pull people in. And
yeah, so David Lynch was huge, which was so ironic. And this is where it's funny. It was like, oh, we're all about peace. We're all about purity. We like light colors. We don't like dark. It's like David Lynch rolls up with objectively some of the darkest, like, widely viewed film material around. And they're like, he's such a good artist. And they're just like totally accepting of all of it just because he's like supporting what they're doing and getting them more and more meditation people. So this is an example of one of the massive companies that existed. It was Books Are Fun, and they created this building out here, and now it's just an office building because they went under. I think there was a scandal with them.
Books Are Fun?
Oh no, there was a scandal with Telegroup. I think they just sold. Yeah, so this was like a book company. We also had another company called Telegroup, which was like kind of sketchy, and like the downfall of it was like a bunch of people ripping off a bunch of other people. But this is just a business park now. Yeah, Maharishi Ayurvedic, so they have their products there. So they have this like massive building of offices, and the Ayurvedic, so they sell Ayurvedic products. It's their headquarters, I think. And then so we have to go to Bic City, so they made their own separate small city outside of Fairfield, which you may have not seen.
Oh, I don't think I have.
It's just kind of like a small town. A smaller town outside the small town.
Well, as a college town, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of like bars and...
Well, I mean, we have 1, 2, 3... We have 3 dedicated bars. The 4th one just closed, but that'll probably open back up again. I mean, for a town of 10,000, like other towns around us have a lot less going on.
Yeah.
Like the amount of restaurants and the amount of bars that we have is way high for our population.
Yeah, and it's interesting for like just this area of America, like it's always so hard to find like vegan food or stuff like that. And so that is one, like there are really like kind of cool progressive things in a town that's in the middle of like a super red state.
Yeah.
Where it's like half of it's run down as if it's still from the, 1940s. And then the other half is like, look at this really progressive coffee shop that is going to have ads for like this lesbian duo band that's rolling through town. It's like, those people probably wouldn't feel safe otherwise coming to like some rural community.
Yeah.
Here.
Sure. Yeah, we have like drag shows.
Yeah.
And it is the case though in terms of bars, what you're saying for university town though, like most people are probably sober and focused on like spirituality or they're doing hallucinogenic drugs or something instead because they're just doing like psychonauts or whatever who are trying to just figure out shit.
So did your parents find Maharishi because of the Beatles, or were they?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it was just him touring. He was just going on tours all around, and the tours he would go to universities and he'd have massive talks of thousands of people, and people would just roll up and
so
be like,
maybe when they were in college,
this is cool. This is what's happening. Yeah, they'd be in college and they'd be like, they go to a talk and they'd learn meditation and be told that they become enlightened, and there was that whole Eastern to Western kind of hippie. I mean, it was the 60s and 70s free love, and then into the 70s. So that's where it happened. Like it really is like a vestige of that 60s free love sort of vibe, but then it became like hyper intellectualized with all the like science behind it and just community. What else would there be? I'm just trying to say like there's positives, there's negatives, but at the end of the day, like I still was like a highly privileged private school child who was given like a ton of opportunities and a high level of education. Very supportive community.
Well, it is nice that they support like a higher level of education, because a lot of cults are like, don't get any other knowledge from anywhere else. I mean, it is a Maharishi university, but the fact that they're bringing in people from all over the world who may or may, I mean, I was thinking of enrolling and getting like doing something here.
And that's where I would say like they're almost on the precipice of being called, like in many ways they are a cult. In many ways they're just a really bad cult because they're failing to do a lot of the control methods that other cults have to keep people in and to squeeze as much money out of them as possible.
Yeah.
And so that's why it hasn't continued to be as successful as it could have been. Like if they had a more manipulative person at the helm take over, for example, and really push these things and use classic cult tactics, like they probably could have.
Well, a thing we use to tell if something is a cult is called the BITE model. And it's behavioral control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And so it's like these 4 indicators of, is the leader doing this? Is he controlling your behavior? Is he controlling the information? Like, do you have information or access to outside information?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to question the leader? Are you allowed
that's one thing. It was very much Maharishi says. So that's one of the things they did right. But then it was like, go outside, that's fine. It's all about being worldly and educated and enlightened and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, this is a bigger version of what you saw in front of the other thing. So this is technically, they call it an observatory.
It feels very like other, I don't know how to say it, like Greek or...
Oh yeah. No, some of these things they're like classic Vedic sculptures, I think, for an observatory. Like,
it's like how the Greek used to learn how to tell time. And
so they are. Yeah. There's literally one of those is a sundial. And a lot of it, again, has to do with the sun. But yeah, it's interesting. But you're supposed to just, like, to become enlightened, you're encouraged to just stare at that for a certain amount of time. And so there's things like that where it's like, come on, like it's just not adding up.
Just like stare at one of the statues?
You're just supposed to stare at these statues and they're supposed to like help you understand the like nature of the universe.
I mean, I just need to try to understand that statue.
Yeah. Well, you haven't stared at it long enough, Erin. But you're staring.
Wow.
So
wait, have I been in there?
No, I haven't even been there.
Oh. I remember my first compost toilet, and I was like a party.
Oh, you were. We actually just drove by that house. We drove by that house on the way here.
Wait, what? You want me to go to the bathroom in this?
But I would say probably one of the biggest gripes of the community is that yes, there are all the people who are in the inner circle of the movement are very wealthy, and they've gotten that money through people who have less money supporting them through courses and just over their life in various ways. And so you have people who, you know, like any other organization, you could say it's just like another nonprofit in that sense where like there's people who are getting too much money. Like I have the same gripe with the Red Cross, you know. Like,
yeah.
And then they have a spa here. This is where Jim Carrey came to the Raj, which is just past the next one here. So these are more houses. And this is where like any celebrity who comes, whether it's Oprah also was involved for a while, Jim Carrey. Wow, these trees have gotten big. So this is an Ayurvedic spa. You can go and get oil up your butt and become purified that way. And they
what?
Yeah, they have all these things of Basti, which I think is, again, most of it is just Ayurvedic things. Like if you go to an Ayurvedic clinic, you're going to get 90% of it. There's just a bit of a difference.
Coffee enema.
Yeah. I mean, it's an enema.
So this is where like Jim Carrey and Oprah stayed?
Yeah, this is where, they'd come and stay and they would get like spa treatments and stuff. And oh, there's a lake back here actually. I haven't been back here in a while. I'm kind of curious. Yeah, but out here, I mean, there's a building called like the Mansion where like people go, and it's a class. I'd say inequality is probably one of the biggest weak spots of this movement. Where they've got, you know, like everything is gold. Like there's places where things are just like gold leafed. And they're just like guys are hanging out in gold leafed places, and then you have people who are in the trailer that's moldy, you know, like 3 miles away.
Oh yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah. And so they haven't shared the wealth enough. They haven't, you know, treated their like constituents as well as they probably should have. And so it's one of my gripes for sure. I mean, I think one of the interesting things and where you should research is just like the history of Maharishi coming here and how much of a sensation that was. Of like when he came to Hawaii and gave a talk and it like blew up, and then he went and he did a tour in like California and went to the East Coast and stuff. And that is what happened, I think, because he went to these Ivy League colleges. He sucked in these Ivy League people who, you know, in some way should have been smart enough to know better, but were also just probably emotionally liking what they saw and the promises. So
and impressionable, idealistic,
yeah, exactly.
Not knowing what, I mean, I don't know, for me, when I got out of college, I was like, wait a minute, I have to pay bills and pay taxes now.
Or I could just meditate, and like if we all get enough world peace, we don't have to work, and like it's hard. It appeals to a lot of the same things that even the current generation, but
lots of false promises.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's like Teal Swan. It's a cash cow to say that you're enlightened, and if you build up enough of a following, you can go all over the world to do these talks and charge $100. It's like you're a rock star.
Yeah.
And people are coming out to see you, and some people will spend over $1,000 just to meet Teal Swan.
That's wild.
And it's like, so think about that back then.
I do know that the talks were free. The basic talks were free that most people saw, but then, you know, there are advanced courses that cost money, but then the meditation itself cost money.
Oh, I remember,
which has been a huge criticism of most people that I know in the movement are critical of that, actually. They say, why, if this is something that everybody deserves to become enlightened, why does it cost us money? And it's like, oh, well, we need to keep the organization going. And they're Maharishi's excuse was, oh, it needs to cost money because if it was free, people wouldn't appreciate it and then they wouldn't do it. And it's like, well, that's kind of a convenient answer.
How much is it to get like...
They actually now have income dependent. I remember the number $300 at some point.
I was going to say, I feel like when I was looking up learning Transcendental Meditation, it was around like $300.
Yeah, it was $300 at some point, who knows. But then the advanced things, like, I remember that was like $5,000 at one point.
Whoa.
Yeah, now I think they got it down to like under 2,000, maybe 1,500. Some of that's room and board in Beatles for a couple weeks, but still, yeah, that was like a big cost. And that is the case. Like, the tuition was really high for a lot of the kids at the school. So their parents would become like basically slaves to the school.
Oh my gosh.
And the whole organization, or move the movement in some way to get the free tuition, and then, you know, to be part of the community, they have to do that, have to have their kids go. So that was kind of harsh for some of them. Then, you know, got to pay the expensive advanced meditation money.
It's so interesting, because it's like, now that I meditate, I'm like, why would you spend that much money to learn how to meditate?
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a different experience for everyone's brain type and like what they're stressed with. And there's also some studies that show that some people should not meditate if they have some kind of childhood trauma where they were like forced to be in like a dark room by themselves and be quiet or stand in the corner. Like, if you're part of your punishment
like
as a kid, it can actually be a triggering experience for you and cause more stress.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I can't complain too hard, but probably the closest I got to that was when I was younger, we got graded on meditation. So if you fell asleep in meditation, you would get a point off, and like, I had to do the flying. I did the flying technique. So if I didn't look like I was flying or trying to fly or like moving in some way, I would get graded off. And so I learned how to like basically shake in my sleep as a teenager who had to go early in the morning, to get perfect grade, or not perfect, or just to not fail. So that was interesting, and they've since changed that. So like, there's all these things that they've changed, which is good.
Well,
but
at least they're
too little, too late in that sense. Yeah, because that's the stuff that scared that next generation off. So this is the complex where they put the pundits, the Indian people. For a while.
Wow.
They were just kind of put out here.
They were like trapped here?
So yeah, they put, I think it was at least 1,000 of them.
Oh my god.
So they would just kind of like play cricket here and like try to get porn and cigarettes from the people that worked there.
And they were brought in to meditate.
Yeah, they were brought in to meditate, but I remember the Indian kids who went to the school who actually spoke Hindi, like, supposed to be a translator on the bus when they picked them up, and they picked the guys up, and he's like, these are just like rural, young, random Indian men who they're not like spiritual, they don't really care that much, they know some things, but like, they just wanted to go to America.
Oh, yeah.
So it was all sort of a con, in the sense that like, the people who were paying to support the pundits were not even paying to support spiritual people, or people who knew the spiritual techniques that they thought, because those people, not even enough people even existed. But then, and then that is where it is an issue, where they had all of those different projects, which then funneled a lot of money to the international headquarters, whether it was like the school itself was funneling money to the international headquarters. Like the tuition was way higher than it needed to be in order to do that. Like things like that, that's the type of thing that leaves a really bad taste in people's mouth, and then they're just like, okay, I'm done with this. And then the whole thing implodes. It's like people making bad financial decisions, getting selfish.
As we ended the tour and I began my journey away from Fairfield, I couldn't stop thinking about the people that gave up their lives to come here, or were brought here and trapped here under false pretenses. I remember being enamored by Fairfield, by the simplicity of it, by the progressiveness of it, by the quirkiness of it, by the artistic qualities of it. It feels like a little haven in an otherwise very remote and conservative part of the country. But now as I drive away, I realize that it's much more sinister, and it's darker than I ever could have imagined. And I can't help but wonder if things will ever change, if enough people will ever discover the truth behind the name Maharishi. One can only hope that time will tell and history will not repeat itself.